This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Simone Wright. You're an entrepreneur, visioneer, and intuition expert. And I want to
Yes,
welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing today?
thanks for having me, Phantom. Happy Memorial Day.
Thank you. Yeah, we already had our picnic.
Yes,
I mean, like
yes.
at the East Coast, but yeah. So one of the things I want to mention to the audience is that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly Network. You can see that little icon up there. It says Newsly. And if people haven't checked that out, if you can use that coupon code GHOST, and that's an audio only platform, be on there later tonight with an audio only version of the podcast if you use coupon code GHOST. And we also have your link up there for simonewright.com, and it looks like a class link to your First Intelligence Entrepreneur Edition. That will be fully clickable. So people don't have to remember that right now. They'll
Awesome.
be able to click through on that anywhere the podcast is published. But
Cool.
again, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to talk about this stuff. It's so important now.
One of the first things I always ask any guest on the show is two things I ask at the beginning: what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
What motivates me? Understanding what life is about motivates me. Um, what motivates me? Wanting to be better every day than I was yesterday. Um, what motivates me? Helping people motivates me. And why do I do what I do? Because I've known what it feels like to not trust yourself. And
Mhm.
so when I'm teaching other people how to listen to their intuition, I think I'm giving them tools to really begin to understand and trust themselves in a really deep way. Because I know the pain of not trusting one's inner voice and the price that you pay for that. And so being able to give people permission and some context and some tools to be able to do that makes me really happy. So that's
That,
what I
that's
do. What I do.
I think that's really interesting because I'm a creative and I work with a lot of creative people, being a musician and a podcaster, um, and a lot of times I kind of feel, yeah, I don't know, people understand to get this idea of like a lot of times musicians and they're in this kind of muse inspired, kind of universe inspired flow state, and some
Mhm,
people they don't understand that, and they say, well, how can you trust that? How could you be in that kind of world? But a lot of times you have your skill set, you have the things that you learned and you practice in your 10,000 hours or whatever you learned how to do.
mhm,
But a lot of times it's that kind of gut intuition as a
mhm,
musician. If you're on stage and you're
mhm,
playing jazz, it's kind of
mhm.
like that. There's no bad note. You know how to play off the note and it's an opportunity. Um,
Yeah.
but I think some people don't feel that. So this discussion, well, I think I'll have a lot of understanding for your point of view, but I want to understand like what is intuition to you?
Intuition for me, well, I mean, I've been hyper intuitive since I was a kid, um, as most children are, because children are sensing and feeling beings. They're not thinking beings. Children don't start thinking till they're about 6 years old. So children are profoundly intuitive. But intuition for me is at its most basic. It's a survival skill, keeps you alive, keeps you safe, keeps you secure in what I call the skin suit, the body. And at its most evolved, it's an intelligence. At its most evolved, it is that muse that you talk about. It's an evolutionary tool at its most evolved. So, and then there's all these sorts of different layers between those things. At its most rudimentary for me, it's a survival intelligence, and at its
Mhm.
most exalted, it's a thrival intelligence. So it'll help you survive and it'll help you thrive if you know how to use it and listen to it properly.
Yeah, a lot of time people have that voice or they feel like a vibe, but they don't go with it. They
Mhm,
kinda they use like a left, right brain. They kinda like,
mhm.
well, I I can't turn this into like a equation. I can't quantify it with math, so it can't be valid.
Yeah.
And as an artist, it's different though. A lot of times, if I'm a musician, I could sit down and write on the bars something
Mhm,
I think is gonna work. But then
mhm.
if I sit at the piano and just let it go,
Yeah.
It's like that tends to work better
Yes.
most of the
Yes.
time. And
Yes.
it's like even though I had all these grandiose ideas that I put down and I wrote down, it's like what they didn't work. It's kind
Mhm.
of like that listening to the muse, or it's really kind of like your subconscious. There's a lot of
Mhm.
stuff in your subconscious, and there's like a lot of stuff like waking dreams
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
if you are more in tune, kind of like you can channel that,
Mhm.
and you have to understand yourself. Like if you
Yeah.
don't lose all the things you know, but
No.
you can kind of deal with the unknown and not be scared of it.
Yes. Yeah. And where I excel as an intuition teacher, because there are a lot of intuition teachers out there, and I too am an artist. So my my day job is artist, and by day I'm an artist, and by night I'm an intuition superhero. So by day I'm an artist, and what was important for me in you said a really important word. You said quantifying. What was important for me in quantifying the intuitive process was being able to reverse engineer it. So, where I got my intuition street cred is in working with law enforcement, helping police departments find missing children, helping them with cold case files. If they were stuck on a particular case, some departments would call me in and have me do what I do. And the one of the police departments that I had done some work with, where we ended up getting a triple life sentence on a triple gang hit homicide, was, I went in and helped them with that. That helped me get my intuition street cred, because I was able to provide information that nobody else would know except for the cops and the people who were there. And so the police department had said, "Well, you want to do this for us full time?" And I said, "Hell no. No,
It's
thank you very
too
much.
heavy. It's too
Not
heavy.
really. No, pretty heavy. And, I'm an artist. I want to stay home and paint, and I want to play with my dogs and my cats and ride my horse and all this other stuff." I said, "But what if I could teach you guys how to do what I do?" And
Mm.
I mean, and when that it came out of my mouth, and I was like, "Oh my God, what have I just done?" Like, oh,
Teach yourself out of a job.
oh, crap. And so they said, "You can teach this?" And I said, "Yeah, I can teach anybody, because everybody's got it. It's just a skill that needs to be understood and developed." So they said, "Okay." So I took 9 months and I reverse engineered it. What's going on in the biology of the body when I'm looking for a kid? What's going on in my brain? What's going on in my heart? What's going on in my gut? What are the kind of questions I'm asking? What are the targets I'm setting? Now, when I'm painting, I don't think about that stuff at all, right? It's just flow state.
Mhm.
But when I'm intuiting in a very high stakes environment, like looking for a missing kid, where time is limited, pressure is on, and stakes are high, I needed a formula. And so I created one. And so I put that formula together, and then I went back 9 months later, and I taught the cops how to do it. And that became First Intelligence, the Science and Spirit of Intuition, the book that became First Intelligence, that developed the training programs for entrepreneurs and other people. But it was a process of really breaking it apart so it could be quantified. So you weren't just crossing your fingers and hoping the muse would show up.
Mhm.
You had a way to call on her and have her serve you in a way that served you in the moment. So that's my superpower. It was fun to reverse engineer it, because at my root, I didn't even know what I was doing. It was
Wow.
natural. It you know.
So how much of that, like, it's like art and science, but, a lot of what because once you put it down, it started to become a little bit probably more like a methodology with more, in tune with maybe science type of mindset. So how much of it is still just pure intuition, and how much of it was like translated into processes that could be repeatable?
Well, it's still pure intuition, just like, you're a musician, you understand that there's a degree. I always liken it to when you go to art school, although I only lasted about 3 weeks in art school, I hated it. But, profoundly self-taught, that it's good to have a proficiency. You know how to do what you do, and then you can just riff, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Right. if you know enough proficiency and you can get proficient enough so you don't have to think about it, that's when the magic really starts to happen. So
Yeah.
I'm I there's the magic that's involved in the intuition. And I'm really hesitant to use the word magic because intuition isn't a supernatural, paranormal, woo-woo magic thing. It's an intelligence. It's again inherent in our biology. But I wanted to be able to, if we could put it into a structure so that then you could get fluent in it, like speaking a language.
Yeah.
And then once you know the language, you can riff, you can beatbox, you can scat, you can,
Do anything. Yeah.
you can
Once
do
you know the
anything with it.
form.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
it's kind of like I'm a synthesis.
Mm,
So I deal with sound waves.
mm,
And I
mhm,
learned on my Moogs and all my analog synths how to take raw sound waves and run
mhm,
them through processes and get them
mhm,
to approximate like organic instruments and then instruments you've never heard. And so what
mhm,
that tends to do is everything we do, language is frequency and vibration.
mhm.
So
Yes.
when you talk, it's the same as singing. You can you're running frequencies, you have beats, you have measures, it's like poetry. So
Mhm,
once you
mhm,
learn that all that language and expression through your voice, whatever voice it
mhm,
is, it has a musicality to it, and you can
mhm,
actually trigger responses from certain
mhm,
vibrations and frequencies.
mhm.
If that's the case, you can feel a vibe when you walk in the room, and so your body's
Absolutely.
picking up frequencies, and your body has a heartbeat, it's pushing out frequencies. They're the frequencies you can't see, and
Yep.
maybe you can't hear because it's subsonic or beyond your hearing range, but it's there.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
intuitive people, creative people, they can pick up on it.
Yes.
They
Yes.
feel it, and
Yeah.
that's in the same way that you're kind of riffing. Once you understand that you can channel it or process it,
Yep.
then
Yep.
that becomes probably what you're talking about.
Perfect,
It
perfect, perfect analogy. It's spot on. Exactly it. Intuition is, being able to pick up those frequencies is just like being able to pick up a radio station in the field,
Mhm.
right? And
You get the
um,
clear signal. There
yep, you
was
get the
static,
clear.
and now you get the clear signal.
Yep, yep. And if you're stressed out, if you're anxious, if you're worried, then your capacity to receive those frequencies is going to be really limited because it is literally like having static on the line. And so
Mhm.
being able to start with a foundation rooted in peace, which so are you is it okay if I give you a little formula?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, when you're playing music, you've got chords, right? You've got three notes that strike a certain harmony. Right? Brrr. One note is
Yeah.
one thing, two notes is another, but a chord of three is quite a different thing. And so when we're shaping our intuition, we want to start with a harmonic. And that
Mhm.
harmonic initially is rooted in, at least from my approach, is rooted in three P's. So I shape these on a harmonic of triads. And so the first P is peace. Now, peace is the spiritual word, the science and the spirit of intuition. Peace is a spiritual word, but the scientific word for peace is coherence. It's
Mhm.
an ordered harmonic wave frequency, right? That's peace. And so you have to be peaceful in your heart. You have to be calm in your heart. You have to be able to reduce stress as much as you can to have that peace part active. The second P of the harmonic is precision. Precision is your capacity to set a strong target. Precision is a capacity to ask potent questions. So if I'm looking for a missing kid, for example, the precision aspect for me in this context is the strong target of the kid is home. The kid is home. That's my target. Not the kid is missing, not where's the kid, not show me the kid, not oh my gosh, where's Bobby, but the kid is home. That's the the next wave function. So the kid is home overlaps the harmonic of peace. So now you've got two harmonics running. And then the third one is perception. What then does your body, your brain, your gut, your skin, your imagination start to perceive? What are the sight, sense, what's the muse saying to you? That's the perception harmonic. So you get all three of those things running at the same time. and then you become like a vibrating transmitter. And
Mhm.
that's vibrating in the field, and then that's the information that then you start to receive, interpret. So it's exactly like a musical chord. And the more stable that is, and a triad is very stable,
Yeah,
the more powerful it is. So
it's
yeah.
interesting because a lot of people probably don't know what they're doing, but they're probably in practicing dissonance or disharmony,
Uh-huh.
right? And so they're doing something like it's a little off. Like you do like a chord that has a five-fingered chord, and you put a
Mhm.
flat or a flat B flat or a sharp into it,
Yeah.
and then you have some level of dissonance.
Yes.
And in music, we do that because sometimes you don't want pure harmony. You want
Right.
something that's a little jolting, you want a little bit of noise, a little
Mhm.
disharmony, dissonance. But like when you're trying to focus
Mhm.
and you want people to remember that chorus, it's
Mhm.
usually not this chord. It's
Yes.
usually it has harmony, it's repeatable, and it makes you feel probably some kind of emotion.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to trigger. Like that
Yeah.
what songwriter wrote is like what they're trying to convey.
Yes.
And so like if you want a positive result, it's like the law of attraction. If you put
Mhm.
out negativity or discordance or dissonance and you're not secure, you're
Mhm.
probably not gonna get you're gonna get the same kind of result.
Yep. 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 And that's why it's really important to have that foundation of peace at the root of everything. Because if you're stressed out or even judging a situation that you might be in, then that's going to cause that dissonance. That's going to be like having a sharp, you've got a sharp or a flat in there somewhere. And and in music, those sharps and flats do serve for variety, but we don't want them in the intuitive process because then it's hard to really be aware. What I call, and if we're going to use the music analogy of a note, is that clean? Is it a clean note? Is it a clean
Mm.
harmonic? And that's always my mission, is to be able to enter that intuitive conversation with as clean a harmonic as I can, so that I can get the information that I want and need at any given time.
We bring clarity to the chaos because a lot of times, life can be chaotic. And any
Mhm.
kind of situation that we run into, the fear is usually because you don't know the outcome
Yes.
or you're not secure about the outcome. But if
Yes.
you can come in and have that kind of you're the captain, you're the general, you come in and you've got the plan. Everybody's
Mhm.
sitting around waiting for somebody to execute the plan.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you could be in the middle of total chaos, but the person who can execute a plan that makes people feel safe or feel like, oh, they're gonna win or they're gonna
Mhm.
execute, then they're like,
Mhm.
wow, this person can go through the storm and actually get us to the shore. Like
Yes.
how can they do that? And that's probably where, how you get to be, the entrepreneur kind of
Yep.
a analogy is like you're going through a storm, but you can keep the ship, you can keep the ship in docking.
Yeah. 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 And that's another beautiful analogy, Phantom, that you want to be able to ride above the waves of the storm. And this is why intuition now is so crucial, because we're all navigating a storm of information, a storm of data, a storm of content, a storm of opinion, a storm of, used to be a 24-hour news cycle and now it's a 24-minute news cycle. And so we are all surfing this tsunami of data and information. And you're either going to be drowned by it, pummeled by it, driven crazy by it, or moved into analysis paralysis by it, or you can use your intuition to surf the wave. You can use your intuition to ride the wave. And a really good surfer can steer his wave or her board wherever he or she wants to. That's what intuition offers us in this age, where you're able to ride above the chaos
Yeah, there's
intentionally.
a lot of chaos. I mean, kind of part of my day job is I'm in IT and I'm kind of like an old school IT. Started off
Hmm.
on old mainframes. Now we're
Mm,
in the world of AI.
hmm.
And a lot of my mainframe buddies, they're not very happy about the AI because they feel like, well, for years they've been able to kind of ride this wave of like there's all these big banks and insurance companies still using the old tech,
Mhm.
and they've had this kind of hold on that. And
Mhm.
now the AI's come in and say, hey, maybe now that's going to wipe that out, and they don't
Mhm.
know it. They don't know the
Mhm.
AI. So was, but then I started, like anything, you have to learn whatever the new tech is
Yeah.
because it seems scary, but a lot of it is just once you learn how to understand the language of whatever's happening today, whatever the new
Mhm.
tool is today, you
Mhm.
can demystify like the danger of it.
Mhm.
You can start to get control over it, right? So
Mhm.
that you can finally right the ship. Because a lot of
Yes.
things are like there's a lot of fear in modern technology, like from robotics to AI,
Mhm.
blockchain. There's a lot of things that are like people it's just gonna take my livelihood away, so I don't know what to do other than
Right.
hate it. So
Right.
it's like how do you not just just have an emotional response to it, but actually find a way, a strategy to actually understand it and
Mhm.
take it and move forward.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I mean, even look at the context of AI. Its brilliance is really only based on the data that's put into it, and then how it. Uh, I'm not a
How
tech
you
guy,
use
so I'm probably good. How it then alchemizes the information that it's been given. And so AI, in my intuitive perspective, is limited because it's limited in the different ways that it can put information
what it can
together
learn.
based.
It
It
only
can
knows
learn.
what it learned. Yeah, like
Mhm.
it is built on what it learned. So in the way I
Yes.
look at it is it's built on old information.
Yes.
And people
Yes.
think it's somehow doing futuristic. It's not
Yeah.
really doing futuristic information. It's
No.
taking stuff that was already known.
Yes.
So if you're a
Yes.
musician, right, and you're moving into experimental music, AI is not going to do the
No.
next experimental thing. It's not going to come up with fusion from
Yes.
bebop to fusion. It's
Yes.
not going to
Yeah.
do that. It's going
No.
to take whatever exists and be able to do that very well
Yes.
to,
Yes.
to parrot that and make it
Yes.
seem like it's intelligent,
Yep.
but it's not sentient.
No.
And I think people are making mistakes and thinking that it's sentient. And it
Yes.
also edits and it totally restricts certain choices. So it
Mhm.
goes through and everybody says, oh, this is great, but then it's missing things.
Mhm.
Like in the world of resumes, it actually is only looking for certain keywords and it's actually not looking at all the candidates.
No.
So human recruiters aren't getting all the candidates because it's editing them out.
Yes.
And
What AI.
it's not a good that's not always a good thing.
No. No, no. AI is missing the muse. AI doesn't have the muse. And so AI, in my perspective, is limited. And the beauty of intuition is that, so let me give you some fundamentals here. Intuition at its most basic, we've all heard of it, is gut instinct. It's basic, it's fundamental, it's binary. Yes, no, good, bad, life affirming, life negating. Don't go down that alley. Don't say yes to that job. It's very basic, it's very binary. Gut instinct is that. Heart, then it moves up in the biology to the heart. Heart intuition is rooted in communication, connection, compassion. You have a heart to heart conversation with somebody. You know what to say intuitively because you're communicating through the heart. Then it moves up in the biology to the head, where that's visionary intuition, where you see a picture of something. Like when I'm looking for a missing kid, it works for me as pictures. Or if I'm
Mhm.
working with an entrepreneur to create a business, I see it in pictures, or they see it in pictures. So it's visionary intuition. And then the highest version of the intuitive process is universal. It's, I don't want to get all spiritual here, but it's the God force, it's the universal force, it's source force, it's the force, it's
Mhm.
infinite, it's eternal, it's it's all information eternally, stuff that we've not even thought of yet at that universal level. So, and we as sentient beings have access to that through our fourth level of intuition. AI can't even touch that intelligence.
Yeah, it's just doing like the yes, no.
Yeah.
And then it seems like it's doing more than that, but it's not. and people can lose a lot if they hand over the reins to something that's just doing yes, no.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it's that, when you have that physical interaction with another human being, like the oral
Mhm.
histories that human beings have had before books,
Mhm.
right,
Mhm.
is always handed down through language learning.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then if you read a book, you get so much. That's why when you go to a lecture and you're in college and you
Mhm.
actually hear the professor relay what was in the book,
Mhm.
lights go on because
Mhm.
something in the book didn't translate, even though he was on the page, didn't get it. It's that
Yep.
communication to directly with the professor that actually
Yes.
makes you understand it.
Yes.
And I don't
Yeah.
think AI can do that.
No. No. AI is AI in my perspective is limited. I'm not worried about it. And you said something really important there. You said the information as it's transmitted through the professor, it's transmitted through a living sentient biology that's dealing with a room full of other living sentient biologies, and those biologies are having an energetic conversation. So the professor is going to know how to quantify and communicate what's on the page in a way that you're not going to get from the written word. And this is also what's really important, that you could you could read a million books on intuition, but if you don't go out into the world and get your feet dirty and get your hands dirty and fall on your face a few times and screw it up and practice, then you're just going to be an armchair intuitionist. It's the same with anything. You could read a book about playing football, but unless you go out on the field and you throw the ball and
Actually
get
do
tackled a
it.
few times, so what?
You can read a book about how to use a standard shift car with a clutch,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
until you actually get in the car and do it,
yeah.
you're not gonna get it because it's like a
No,
it's like a hand-eye coordination. It's a
yeah,
feel. It's a
yeah.
feel thing, like riding a bike. You could read about riding a bike, but you're not gonna know it till you go down the bike and you fall down and scrape your knee.
Exactly, exactly, and you're gonna fall down, and so the intuition thing is like learning to speak a language, and
Mhm.
so you have to understand some of the rules of language. Like when you speak English and then you go and speak French, there's different rules to English and French. There's different rules to French and to Spanish. You got to understand there's different rules in music, there's different rules in jazz, there's different rules in country music, there's different rules in all of these communication structures. And so intuition is a language. And once you learn to understand the rules of the language and you can speak it fluently, but you got to go speak it. Like I spent a lot
Yeah,
of
you
time
gotta
in
do it in
Italy.
your 10,000 hours, you gotta do
Yeah,
that. You gotta do the work, and
you
the
have.
problem is there's so many tools today that people have.
Yes.
They'll go and they'll sample, they'll cut and paste, they'll run an AI bot. It's like, "Well, I can write a book with AI." Really?
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
like, well, am I gonna wanna read that?
Yeah.
Probably not. It's not gonna be
No.
Hemingway. It's not gonna
Mm-mm. Mm.
it's not gonna be William Blake
No.
because they're
No.
missing that spark of humanity. There's like
Mhm.
there's like, when I wanna see an AI directed movie, I'll go watch Citizen Kane again.
Mhm.
I probably would rather watch Citizen Kane because Orson Welles
Mhm.
is a human being that
Yeah.
decided to do things that nobody else had done because he didn't know
Yes.
it that you couldn't do it. Then when they
Yes.
asked him about it, he said, "Well, why did you use these camera angles? Why did you?" "No, I didn't. Nobody told me I couldn't do it.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
did it. I
Yeah.
wasn't trained. I went and did what I thought the camera should see."
Mhm.
And I thought
Mhm.
that was really interesting because that's how you break boundaries when somebody goes into a canon or told that this is it. This is how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah.
And then you get
Yeah.
somebody who says, "Why can't I do it this way? Why can't I
Mhm.
do it a different way?" And the
Yeah.
human being will do that, but the
Yeah.
computer is just gonna do whatever the machine learning told them, and it's a whatever has gone on before.
Yes. It's very limited. It's very limited. And that's why, Steve Jobs was very vocal about uh, his intuitive approach to business, and which is why Apple's idea was be an outlier. It's the crazy people who change the world. So go ahead and be crazy.
It was more
And
artistic.
yeah,
Everything Apple was doing was not from a business mind, not from a pure logic mind. There was
no,
a lot of artistry to it. They
yes,
it was like doing something that was kinda out of left field. It's like, you think it's like Andy Warhol type. It's like, oh, if Andy Warhol running a tech company, he's going to do it that
Hmm.
way.
Yeah.
Because it's more artistic. And,
Yeah.
that's what you kind of miss from not having jobs around is like, are they they're trying to still have his aesthetic, but he's not here. So,
Well, theirs is the artificial intelligence version of Steve Jobs, right? They're trying to follow a formula based on pre-existing data, but the muse isn't there. And
yeah,
so the outcomes are different. But this is again why intuition is so important and why I call intuition our first intelligence, because it's the intelligence that we have within us and available to us before we know anything, number one, before we're told that there are any rules to follow, number two, and before we're told that there's any sort of box that you need to fit in order to create. And I've always been a very poor, this is why I only lasted 3 weeks in art school, because I'm a very poor rule follower. I'm a very poor box fitter inner. And, and I'm kind of like, well, if you tell me that it can't be done, then I'll be the one who goes and figures out a way
who
to tell
tries
you
to
that it
do it.
can.
Yeah,
So those are the trademarks of an intuitive person. And I always say that when you're using your intuition well, it helps you set trends instead of follow them. It helps you
yes.
set trends instead of follow them. Because if you're just following a trend, then no innovation occurs. Nothing new can
Or you
emerge.
just be in a
So
box. That's the
yeah.
problem is a lot of times I always find it interesting that businesses say they want the creative, say they want that person that's gonna be outside the bell curve,
Hmm.
but then they still measure people like the bell curve.
Hmm.
Like, they still have performance reviews, they're basically looking for somebody to beat a robot.
Hmm.
And, like, if you want a creative person, they're gonna be on the side of the bell curve, they're
Yep.
not gonna be in the middle, they're gonna be the outlier.
Yes.
And so they're gonna be not wanting to stay in the cube.
Yeah.
They're not gonna wanna do the typical 9 to 5. They're gonna have ideas that are outside of that box,
Hmm.
and then you're gonna punish them for not being in the box.
Yes. Yeah.
So you
That's
better
why
figure it out.
That's why most intuitive people are entrepreneurs. That's why most intuitive people, like, I mean, you've got your sort of regular gig as your IT guy, but you've also got this powerful creative side where your intuition is just given free rein to be creative and talk and flow and no rules. And, you know, you kind
Keeps
of
her
have to do that to feed yourself, like to feed
Yeah,
yourself
you have to
energetically.
do it just to, as a cathartic thing. Well, it's just like to be an artist, I don't do it for money. I do
Hmm.
it because that's what I do. Right. I
Hmm.
just want to be in that kind of creative space. And
Hmm.
if it generates money, that's fine. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to push it away.
Yeah.
But the idea is like when you're trying to purposely get the billion views or get the
Hmm.
billion hits, it's like usually you're going to create something that's not really hitting it. But
Well,
you know,
there's a
but
dissonance to that too, right? But it's I was always told that in school I was hard to teach. I was told that I was a difficult student, and then and then when I used my intuition creatively, I would get accused of plagiarism. I would get accused of copying things. And I remember on one occasion I was given a book report and I used my intuition. And again, I've been intuitive since I was a kid. And because I'm not a good student, I just kind of I winged it. I
wing
riffed and I wrote this book report. And the teacher thought I had copied it from an encyclopedia or something because the level of context was pretty high. And so, they called me and my mom into the office and accused me of things. And they said, she must be copying it from the encyclopedia. And my mom says, we don't have the encyclopedia. So I don't
show me
know.
which encyclopedia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Prove where it came from.
Yeah. So you were kind of damned if you were, damned if you did, and damned if you didn't when you're coming as an intuitive. And so when I was young, I kept it very bottled up. And that's why, being a professional artist, that's where I was allowed to really let it shine. And then when I was invited to work with law enforcement, I really took the lid off of it and said, believe me or don't believe me. What's the validation? The kid is home or this case is solved. I don't,
Well,
so
out of the box thinking is really important because a lot of times the way you get people, they put blinders on. So I would
mhm,
think that what you probably did is open up the eyes of people to like maybe go down the blind alley that they didn't. It's not really a blind alley, but they thought it was. You
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
sometimes people won't even open the door, or they
Mm-mm.
won't even look somewhere because they just say, "Well, that's not even worth doing."
Yeah.
And you have to kind of push it when you're like an intuitive. Like it's like, why not go in this direction? Well, nobody goes that way, so we're not going to go that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that tends to be the nobody wants to go down that path.
Well, and I say this too, that to live an intuitive life, you can't be a sissy. Intuitive life is not for sissies. You have to have a degree of courage that people who are following intellect simply don't need because they're following data. But when I went back up to Canada to train those 22 police detectives, I had them in a room for 3.5 days, and most of them were delighted to be there, or at least curious to be there. And one guy sat in the front row for those whole 3 days with his arms crossed, kind of like, yeah, this
What
is a
is
load
this?
of crap, but I'm here. Blah, blah, blah. But I said to them, I said, how many? This is the first thing I asked them. I said, how many of you guys and gals have been on the scene on a crime scene or whatever, or an investigation, and you just knew in your gut something wasn't right. You just knew something was off. Maybe you just knew it. But you couldn't explain why you knew it. You just knew that you knew it. And every hand in the room went up. Even the guy who had his arms crossed and, was trying to kill me with his eyes. And so I said, okay, so I'm not trying to convince you of something that you don't already know to some degree you already have. I'm just here to help you refine it. I'm not here to try to convince you of anything. But if you guys already know that you've got something going on within your beingness that tells you when something's off, what would it be like then if you could amplify that, direct it at will, and then
Folks.
trust it? And they're like, okay, you got our attention. You've got us for 3 days. So that's where we worked on it. And so this is why I say everybody is intuitive. But at different levels, it's taught out of us because we're all born profoundly intuitive. Again, children are sensing beings, they're not thinking beings.
Mhm.
But other children will tend to move, they're more easily trained out of their intuition. And that will tend to be the children that are more intellectual. And that's fine. My goal is to be able to bridge that gap between intellect and intuition so they work as a team, not to throw the baby out
Yeah,
with the bathwater.
you shouldn't throw that childlike wonder because I think that's
Mm,
why I find with artists is a lot
mhm,
of us, we keep it.
mhm,
That like
mhm,
the child curiosity to try things and not care what anybody's gonna think,
mhm,
and because it doesn't matter,
mhm.
because whatever serves what we're working on
Yeah.
is where I'm gonna go,
Yes.
so and that doesn't always follow the rules,
No.
and
No.
not that you don't learn certain. I mean, I learn my scales, I learn my chords, I learn the keys, like what,
Mhm,
but then you would just start to figure like, what happens if I invert this? What happens
mhm,
if I cross this with a different genre? What happens
mhm,
if I tune this a little differently?
mhm,
Right? And I go and do a non-standard tuning and I do something here that's a
mhm.
little doesn't seem like it would work, but then it does work. And
Yeah.
so that's that's the stuff where you take risks. You're willing to
Yes.
take that risk because there's a lot of reward when you're kind of on that bleeding edge.
Yes.
Uh, what I find is, and it's like you're willing to listen to the muse, and the muse is a lot of it's you. It is a lot of
It's all
subconscious
you.
stuff. It's
It's
all
all
that, but
you.
it is other stuff you might have seen from the outside. You might have
Yeah.
heard something on the radio. You might have read something in the
Yeah.
newspaper, and still your interpretation
Yes.
of
Yes.
whatever you saw as an input.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so, on the subconscious level, we all have people tend to think that our subconscious is sort of our single individual unconscious program, but it's not. The subconscious is infinite, and we have access to infinite subconscious patterns. What helps us understand, and as intuitives, and again, when we're young and we're intuitive, we're doing it naturally. We're making choices and then accessing the subconscious and then getting that information and it showing up as our intuition. When we're older, and so the subconscious has the capacity to create. It is the creative mode, but it doesn't have the capacity to choose.
Hmm.
The conscious mind, this is why when I'm working intuitively, I have to consciously choose a target. The kid is home. That's my target. So the conscious mind has the capacity to choose, but it doesn't have the capacity to create. The subconscious mind has the capacity to create, but it can't choose. So you've got to be able to merge those two things together. So when, as entrepreneurs or musicians or creatives, we have to be able to set a target. And when I'm working with entrepreneurs, I have them set up a triad target, another harmonic of time being one, ideas being two, and money being three. So you set up, every business needs to have those three things active: time,
Hmm.
ideas, and money. And once that harmonic, that's your target. So your conscious mind chooses that target. Then you start running the triad of peace, precision, and perception. And then what have you got? You would know what this is. If two chords, different chords, but are playing at the same time, but they still create a harmonic, there's got to be a word for that. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's two different chords playing at the same time, but it's still creating a harmonic. So you're using your conscious mind to choose. I always say it's like a cowboy throwing his lasso into a herd of 10,000 cows and picking out one as a possibility, and then using that information to move him forward. So those ideas of conscious and subconscious, then tapping into the superconscious, the universal field of everything, is what our intuition is really. It's the harmonic of conscious, subconscious, and superconscious all agreeing to the same target. And then that's when things really start to, holy moly, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. That's when things really start to happen
That's
in a
where you
big
kind
way.
of get into this like synchronicity type of thing
Hmm.
where, it's like even though you could have different chords, if they're in the same scale, then they're
Okay.
going to kind of have the same, they're going to be in the same kind of harmonic rather than
Okay.
discordant. Because if you run a different chord, it's like totally opposite. You have some discordance with something that's harmonic, like it's in
Okay.
harmony. But if you
Okay.
could actually do things that are kind of like shadow vocals. There are like
Okay.
people will go and put down vocals that are
Hmm.
very low in the mix and then build
Hmm.
up on them. And then
Hmm.
when you put them all together, they're all in the same key and they
Mm.
all kind of build up the vocal so the vocal
Mm.
sounds like more than one person because it is. It's
Hmm.
like they keep on doubling or keep on
Mm.
adding, but they'll do like little hints of it and then
Hmm.
accent different parts of it. And then
Hmm.
when you hear it all at once, it becomes like that chord. But it's got
Mm.
colors. There's like colors to it and
Yes.
how it shapes it and it gets fatter. It gets
Yes.
more a bigger sound.
Yes.
I
Yes.
deal with a lot of old gear that will tune like something like each note is tuned by an oscillator. Each oscillator
Hmm.
is in a
Hmm.
different, slightly different key. And when you put them all
Okay.
together, it creates something that's very harmonic. By themselves, they would seem discordant, but then you put it
Right.
together
Right.
and it's a really cool
And
sound.
I'd be interested to know then, when you're combining those different notes within the same harmonic, does the size of the wave function, the amplitude of the wave function, does it get bigger?
Like sometimes, like on analog synthesizer, it takes up all the headroom, what we call headroom. Like in
Mhm.
the mix, it can take up all the room. Some of my like, if I'm using something like a Moog, which is a famous
Okay.
analog synth, it's so fat in the mix
Mhm.
that it drowns out other things.
Mm,
So
mm,
sometimes people try to tone it down
mhm.
and they use other instruments that aren't as heavy because it will
Okay.
take up so much bandwidth or so much headroom that
Mhm.
in the mix, it's like the recording engineers look at it and say, "Well, this Moog is taking up so much bandwidth, I can't put other instruments into this song
Okay.
because it's taking up too much room." So
Okay.
sometimes you have to bring it down in the
Uh-huh.
mix
You have to
or decide
balance it.
balance it out because it's like too
Okay.
heavy.
Mhm.
And that's where like some of that old 70s stuff stopped getting used because people
Mhm.
wanted more delicate sounds and the
Mm.
digital stuff allowed the people to be like more delicate and not take up as much bandwidth. with,
Mhm,
but it
mhm,
doesn't have the presence
mhm.
of the
Yeah.
of the analog. Is older technology, but it's very powerful and it's very warm,
Yes.
kind of like
Yeah.
ham and organ. Something that just takes up a lot of room, and then
Right.
you
There's a
feel it, and like
richness.
there's a richness to it, but sometimes it can be too rich. And
Mhm.
it really whatever serves the song. Like
Right.
if that song deserves to have something that rich, then
Yeah.
do it. If it
Right.
doesn't, don't do it.
Right, right, right. Well, and you want to balance your richness with something a little, you don't want, you have really good chocolate with a little espresso. That's why chocolate and espresso go so well together because it's the
Like a cook
richness of
knows
the
what we're
chocolate.
talking about.
Yes,
Any
yes,
chef
yes,
would know, like,
yes.
you don't wanna overpower the flavors if you're
Right, right.
trying to make something really delicate or sudden have a certain taste. You can't use something that's, like, overpowering and ain't gonna ruin the whole recipe.
Right. Well, and that's why this blend in the intuitive conversation is so important. So it's, this idea of peace, precision, and perception, and then the idea of time, ideas, and money. And then you add another harmonic onto that of head, heart, and gut.
Mhm.
And and so you start adding all of these frequencies, these ideas, and then when you're done you get this really rich, deep, but balanced. And then a fourth and final triad, to just throw another whammy into the mix, is the accuracy triad. And that's the triad of elegance, efficiency, and expansion. Because people are often wondering, well, how do I know if my intuition is accurate? And I say, okay, intuition is elegant. It gives you simple, clear direction, just like the GPS in your car. It's not fancy. There's not a lot of bells and whistles. It's turn left, turn right, go 4 miles, make a U-turn. It's la, 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 la. It's elegant. It's efficient. It's not going to tell you drive 4 miles and then turn around and drive 2 miles and then take a left and go 14 miles when all you need to do is go around the corner. It's very efficient. It doesn't waste time. It doesn't waste energy. And it's expansive. It's going to invite you to grow. It's going to invite you to take risks. It's going to invite you to do stuff you've never done before. So now you've got four triads, four different harmonics, but they're all rooted in your evolution. And so you start to be able to recognize, oh, I'm speaking this language. Okay, do I have these four triads all playing the same song? Maybe one's the violin, maybe one's the cello, maybe one's the percussion, maybe one's the timpani. I don't know. I'm not a super musician. But you've got four instruments, but they're all playing the same song.
Mhm.
And that's how you start to get fluent, because it's not just when you know the formula, then you can riff, right?
Yeah,
And
well, yeah, you gotta have a roadmap. It's kinda like to tell your story, you gotta have the plot,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
You gotta start somewhere, and you gotta have a direction, and, like, you're giving people, like, a tool set
Hmm.
that it kinda train in your brain, because
Yes.
our brain sometimes can think that there's limited choices where it's more expansive, like, a type of
Hmm.
music, I call my music expansive,
Mm,
um, and, we actually call it expansive sound experiments because it's because it's a very experimental, but the idea is, like,
yeah,
if you have that frame, because a lot of people in music, they'll try to say, "What do you do?" "Oh, what genre are you?"
yeah.
And you say, "Well, I'm electronic or EDM, I'm trance, I'm rock, and whatever." But you say you're expansive, then they say, "What does that mean?" "Means I can
Right.
cross over all of them." And they're like,
Boom.
"What?" And it because that's what I like to do. And they don't
Hmm.
like that because
Hmm.
they wanna pin you and say, "Well, you're
Hmm.
just EDM or you're country or you're rock or you're
Hmm.
soul." They don't wanna hear you're expansive
No, no.
because that's like, how do I market that? 'Cause
Yes,
I have to market to a niche.
yes,
But
yes.
what if you don't really belong in that niche?
Well, again, what if you set trends instead of follow them? And I'd rather lead than follow. And if somebody has a, this might sound a little bitchy, and I don't care. If somebody has a hard time keeping up, that's not
That'd
my
be your problem.
problem.
Yeah. That's the
So,
problem
yeah,
because they have a hard
it
time
might be a
keeping up.
problem. This might be a problem, but it's not mine. And so that's what intuitives tend to do. Like, Michelangelo in his day was considered a rule breaker. Leonardo da Vinci was considered a rule breaker. Steve Jobs, rule breaker. Richard Branson, rule breaker. Warren Buffett, rule breaker. Like the list of rule breakers who work with their intuition is long and deep and wide, and some of the greatest, paradigm shifters in history. So even Einstein said that he got more of his ideas using his intuition than he ever did trying to grind it out in the lab.
Yeah, well, he got like D's in math. I mean, they for somebody that was a brilliant mathematician and physicist, when they
Yes.
were trying to measure him, it was kind of like the bell curve. They couldn't measure
Yes.
him correctly.
Mm-mm. Yep.
A lot of times with somebody's on the cutting edge, they will fail the standard
Hmm.
assessment
Hmm.
because they're way beyond it. And the
Yes.
assessment's just testing like the kind of typical person, but not
Yeah.
the atypical person. So it's not
Yes.
going to get it right. And then the
No.
problem is everybody wants to have these, like certified this, certified that,
Hmm.
that they got the establishment degree from Berkeley
Hmm.
or whatever. But how
Hmm.
many artists are not from Berkeley or not from, yeah, how many? I mean, Hendrix didn't go to this, you know, he didn't.
Yeah. No.
Dylan,
No.
he didn't go either. It's like
No.
most of them didn't go. So
No.
what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. And the irony of it is, like I said, this is the third time I've said it. I lasted 3 weeks in art school. The some of my friends who got their art degree, who did the 4 years and got their letters, uh, they're not doing art now. And I'm just like, well, I'm the one who didn't complete art school, and I'm a globally collected, very highly awarded, all over the world, highest selling
That's
artist of my kind in the world kind of thing. But oh, I didn't go to art school,
yeah.
and yeah, that's okay.
Most
So
bluesmen, didn't go to the seminary. They didn't go to they didn't do it because,
no,
you know, 'cause they felt it, man. A lot like,
yes,
if you feel it and you can do it, whether you can, if you wanna be a professor, that's fine. If
hmm,
you wanna be able to explain it, but that's a
hmm,
different skill set than
yes,
actually being the person who actually can do it.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
and then people
yeah,
get confused
yeah.
because, like,
Well,
it's
and your
different, not to
intuition,
put it down, but, like, yeah, it's like, it's okay.
your intuition. So this is why I root my what I teach in the science of it and the spirit of it, because and this was the blessing for me in working for law enforcement, which is why I think it makes me such a good teacher, is because I could do it naturally, but then I had the curiosity to figure out what I was doing. And
Mhm.
so I had to learn how to, I had to, that was the reverse
Construct it.
engineering. So how can then I teach this? And and so that was really what was kind of cool for me, because I was doing it intuitively, naturally my whole life. So I didn't have to think about it. But when I reverse engineered it and really thought about what I was doing and could apply that formula to it, my intuition went, it took off like bananas. It just took off. And so I think, as people who are naturally intuitively gifted, if you understand it in a way that you kind of got to use your intellect a little bit more about it, then you're going to become, let's say you're a naturally gifted musician and you've just been naturally gifted your whole life. And let's just say you go to Juilliard for a summer school, and you go and you learn some stuff, and then you come back and you mix those two things together, something's going to come out of that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So that's why I'm really excited about what I was able to discover when I reverse engineered it, because now I can say, okay, intuitives, creatives, you yo-yos in the back of the room who are viewed as the outlier crazy people, here, let's formulate that so then you become even more potent in that way. And then you're
Well, that's
almost
your superpower.
untouchable. That's your
Well, your
superpower.
superpower was, yeah, well, your superpower too was able to be to deconstruct that and then be able to put it together in a lesson plan or in a
Hmm.
book to
Hmm.
be able, because a lot of times people will have like a talent, but they don't know how to explain their talent. They don't
Yeah.
know how to explain how they got to be Hendrix, right? Or they can't
Yeah.
really translate it to someone else, and so there's only one Hendrix because couldn't really teach anybody else how to do it.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
if you can actually teach somebody else, to be able to bring that out of themselves,
Hmm.
that's a superpower in itself because you can, you're kind of you're paying it forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that was the thing too, because you would hear people like Richard Branson or Oprah or Steve Jobs or those guys talking about, oh, I use my intuition to do this, but none of them could explain how they were doing it. And so I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, there's my in, right? Because
good.
all these big
Yeah.
fancy people are saying, oh, use your intuition. And they'd say, okay, tell me how. And they're like, I don't know. I don't know how to do it. It's like, all right, Simone, here's your wheelhouse. Go fill that
Well,
gap.
that's a good place to be because that's where you find a new you give yourself, yeah, your own career,
Yeah.
because you create that space like people weren't willing to like really try to, you would did the work to figure out like, well, how am I doing this?
Yeah.
Most people won't sit there like in the looking glass kind of self and figure out like, well, how is that happening?
Yeah.
They don't do that investigation to figure out because it's like, well, that's a lot of work. I don't know if I'm going to, you know.
Well, and in that moment when I said to my police detective friend, "Well, what if I could teach you guys how to do this?" And then I was like, "Holy crap, what have I just done? Because what if I can't teach you how to do this?" So in that moment, when I asked that question, that was my intuition talking, right? Because if I sincerely thought about it, there's no way
It's
in
like,
hell.
that's a lot of
And
work.
I'd be like, "No, I'm not going to
You
do
give
it. I'm not
myself a
going
big
to do it."
project there.
Yeah, it's like, "Oh, crap, now what do I do?" So I kinda wanted to put it back into my mouth, but his eyes lit up. He's like, "You can teach that?" And I'm like, "Whoa, sure." And
Mhm.
listen, I had already been teaching intuition, but to sort of more of the spiritual community where their framework of skepticism was much lower and they're more willing. So for me
Yeah,
to go into the gauntlet of law enforcement, high level
yeah,
skepticism
hard crowd,
and
hard
hard
crowd.
crowd, tough crowd, and you can't go in there waving crystals. You can't go in there saying, I'm going to talk to my animal guides. You've got to be
No,
able to, you know, it has
yeah,
to be rooted in
they
science.
wanna see it. They want it.
Well,
They want the real deal.
they want the real deal because you can't go into court with evidence that says based on a hunch. You
Mhm.
have to be able to go into court with facts. And so I could not go into training the cops being anything even slightly resembling fluffy. So
Mhm.
that's part of my what makes me different, I think, in the world of intuition coaches, is that I'm so not fluffy. It's
That's
because
probably a rare thing because like I said, most people probably don't wanna do the work to
mm-mm.
make it not fluffy. Like
Yeah,
to actually get down, distill it, and actually get to the core to be
yeah,
able to analyze it,
yeah,
and turn it into something that's not fluffy.
yeah,
And that seems like a lot of hard work, but like if you have a passion for it, which
mhm,
you do, so
mhm.
you didn't stop, you went and did it.
Yeah, yeah. And what was interesting too, that when I started to develop the program, my intuition is what helped me develop the program, right? I had a target. I'm developing an intuition training program for law enforcement. And as I started to, it would lead me step one, do this, step two, do this, step three, look at the biology, and my intuition just led me, led me, led me. And people keep saying, well, it must have been really hard to write the book because you're not a science-based person. And I said, well, initially it concerned me a bit, but then my intuition told me, look to this scientific study, look to this scientific story, look to the biology of the cells, look to the biology of the brain. And you said
That's what I'm
something
saying.
earlier.
Brought it to you. Law
Yeah,
of
so
attraction
the
kind of brought it
intuition
to you.
brought it all to me.
Yeah.
And you had said something earlier, Phantom, about, you could walk into a room and just, your skin gets all skin bumply and the hair stands up on the back of your neck if, there's a creepy person in there. And here's the science of that. So here's for you science nerds. When our body is developing in our mom's tummy and we're embryonic, there's a group of cells that form the nervous system and the brain. And when we're developing, I think it's at about 3 or 4 months, those cells start to split. And one group of cells goes to form the nervous system, the spinal cord, and all of the nerves that are extending from that. And the other group of cells goes to form the skin.
Mhm.
So we are literally covered in nervous system. We're literally
Nervous
covered
system.
in brain,
Like spinal,
s-
like, yeah,
it's
nervous
it's
system capability.
nervous system, our skin, all of those, 100 trillion cells. So when you walk into a room and somebody's kind of got a weird vibe and the skin and your skin stands up or your hair gets all goose pimply,
You're
it's
sensing
be-
it.
you're sensing it, and the receptor is the skin. It's scanning the environment. Beep, 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 beep.
But I
Oh,
think we've all been taught not to listen to that.
yeah.
So, like, think like ancient humans
Hmm.
probably really listened to that a lot when they were in
Hmm.
an environment with the wolf and the saber tooth, and they had to listen to it. They had
Yep.
to know what's going on. But as
Yep.
we get all these technical marvels around us, we get less and less. I don't need that.
Yes.
I would use my tool rather than use my body.
Yep.
And I think that's where the kind of disconnect between what your capabilities are
Hmm.
in your body and your mind. So
Hmm.
you lose capability in your mind and you lose your sensory perceptions
Hmm.
because then you don't believe in them because like you're kind of told, oh, you only have three, you only
Yeah.
have this,
Yeah.
you don't have it. So you don't think about it
No.
other than you don't have it. So
Yes.
then
Yeah.
you're
Well, and
living
then
in
it's
like without.
yes, and we're also socially conditioned out of it because, and especially for women, if women get that sort of and their skin crawls and this like, oh, but don't be, or as children, we'll sense somebody's not safe and we'll retreat, we'll withdraw, we'll hang by mom's skirt, and mom will push us forward and say, go ahead, don't be shy, don't be rude, go play with Uncle Bob, and Uncle Bob is a predator,
Yeah,
right?
the wrong
And
move.
so we're trained out of it at a very young age because of social constructs, be polite, play
Yeah,
nice with the other people.
listen to your parents, you listen to your
Yep.
elder.
Yep.
Don't pay attention to the vibe you got,
That's
and
right. Yep.
because, like, the social structure becomes the rule, and the
Hmm.
structure could be wrong, but,
Hmm.
it could be have a lot of bad actors or bad results,
Yep. Yep.
because it's not it's a lot of hidden things, hidden
Yes.
traps where people aren't being, forward.
Yeah.
But I think that what we've been talking about is just incredible, and you have a lot of interesting, um, what you've talked about, I've never heard before. So
Good.
that is just fantastic. But we
Good.
always hit our hour mark faster than we ever anticipate.
Oh my gosh, that blew by.
And
Holy cow.
yeah,
Holy
we
cow.
hit it. So, but we do have your link again for your class. I did want you to explain to why if people click on that link. It's like that first Intelligence Entrepreneur Edition. What happens when they click on that?
Well, you'll see sort of the basics of the entrepreneurial First Intelligence edition, and you'll see there what's included in that online program. Why intuition for entrepreneurs is so important. How to be able to use it, like Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, and those sorts of folks do. It's a deep dive, intensive online program that will help you with those four triads that we talked about. Um, it's a roadmap to
Mhm.
that for you. And it's lifetime access. You can study on your own. You can use whatever modules you want, hit whatever targets you want, do it in whatever cycle or circuit you want. But it's really going to help you fine tune that intuition process for you, especially if you have entrepreneurial goals. Um, I'm really proud of
That's
it.
awesome.
Yeah.
People can get to your book from your website too. They can find your book.
Yes. Yes. I think it's available on Amazon. It's the easiest way to get it. And people can also
Oh,
work with
okay.
me one on one. You can
Oh,
also work
awesome.
with
So they can
me.
book time with you. They can book
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And that's always fun too, because it's good to have somebody to bang those targets off of and refine targets with. And so that's always fun for me to be able to work with an entrepreneur to set a really strong time, ideas, money target and have them hit it. That's I view my clients as athletes, um, and that I'm taking them to the Olympics intuitively, and that's how I coach, that's how I teach, and so I give them the tools, and then I boot them out onto the field, and I say, "Go do your thing, and then come back, and So there's lots of ways you can work with me.
That's awesome. I do
Yeah.
appreciate you being a guest on a Family Electric Coach podcast. We were just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and we'll be on all the platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And thank you
Awesome.
again for being a guest on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a great time. Went by so fast. You're a great interviewer. You're a great
Thank you.
interviewer. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks, Phantom.